Right, I'll make some introductions. For those that don't know me, I'm Jenny Lewis. I'm a senior occupational therapist and senior lecturer here. And we're really delighted to have Bruna Galobardes, I hope that's how you pronounce your surname, who's come from Bristol actually, but is based, works for the Wellcome Trust as a senior portfolio manager. And is going to talk to us today mainly about what the Wellcome Trust can offer, but also about an exciting development that AHPs are now included as clinical researchers within some of the Wellcome Trust grants. So I'm hoping that we can hear a little bit more about that, and also about more about the application process. And so, Bruna, your background is as a medic, is that right? Yep. And you worked in Bristol for a Wellcome, was it MRC Centre at Bristol University?
Yes, it didn't have the MRC Centre that it has now, but yeah, so I worked for a number of years at the University of Bristol, the Department of Social Medicine, did research for a few years and then moved to research funding.
And you've had quite a bit of contact with allied health professions within your clinical career, so yeah.
And nurses.
And
you mean allied health professionals
and nurses? Yes, I believe it's it's open to all health professionals.
All healthcare professionals. That's how we know. Which was about time, wasn't it? So I'm really glad. Thank you so much for inviting me. And yes, very delighted that Wellcome finally recognises all healthcare professionals eligible for the clinical schemes, and I'll go through that. I'll talk a bit. I'll talk a bit about Wellcome, how we fund. Just there's just one update that I want to make you aware about the funding. Our funding schemes, what the clinical schemes are. Briefly, other awards, and then some tips on how to submit strong applications. So we're an independent global charitable foundation dedicated to understanding and improving health. We were established in 1936 under the will of Sir Henry Wellcome, and we're funded from a private endowment of around 26 billion. We expect to spend 5 billion on charitable activities over the next 5 years. What this means is that we are independent. We don't depend on other people giving us money, so we're not accountable to anybody that gives us money. We're accountable to what we do and to the public of what we do with this money. And we try to do this wisely. The aim, as I said, is to improve health by understanding the processes that underpin life, exploring the way social, historical and ethical factors affect how people experience healthcare.
Apologies for being a little bit late.
No worries. Developing new technologies, treatments and diagnostics, engaging the public and influencing healthcare policy. How do we fund? Basically there are two main streams. One is the primary fund, which is the one I'll be talking today, and the other is the reserve fund. The primary fund is funding in response mode and is competitive. Last year, I realised, probably refers to 2017, so it's not 2018. A request totaling 8 billion. We spent approximately 900 million in 2016-17, and we fund mainly UK and Ireland, but also low and middle income countries. The different ways that we use our funds, one is through people and teams, and with people is fellowships at all levels. Investigator Award is more the traditional grant, and then collaborative awards. We also have lots of joint funding initiatives. We have partnerships with most other funders. We do health trials, health system research. We also find places, programs and infrastructure. So we have Wellcome Centres where we fund a whole centre and institutes, some of them in mixed countries. And we also fund biomedical resource and technology development, multi-use equipment, and separately, so these are all separate schemes that we have, longitudinal population studies. The reserve fund, that's for strategic investments that we decide, and we deliver very specific outputs and outcomes, and that's largely not an open response mode. The response mode is researcher-led. You tell us what you want to do and why that is important. Through the reserve fund, we decide in consultation what is strategic. And for example, these are some of the strategic initiatives that we have. There is one on diversity and inclusion, how to bring, and part of the changing, the broadening the inclusion criteria was under the auspices of the diversity and inclusion team. We have a drug resistance infections priority, mental health. We've just recruited the head and we'll start a whole program. Our planet, our health is another one. And you see that it's very varied in terms of what has been considered strategic, and there's more details. These two in development have now been approved. I'm not sure the news are out, so whenever it comes into the news, I'm not sure I can. The portfolio is mostly in the UK, but you can see that it's distributed around the globe. And yeah, could have put that at the end, but just to start with, because the one thing we often, and I spend a lot of time saying, no, that is not true. So yeah, might be good to just say it from the beginning, and do not, there's a lot of myths about funders, not just Wellcome. I was at MRC before, exact same thing. So we spend a lot of time saying, no, that's not true. And what I recommend is just ask us, don't rely on what someone else tells you. And it's very interesting how these things happen, and I think it's more, you do an application, it doesn't get funded, and you start thinking why. And the whys of your specific application sometimes is difficult to understand without knowing what else was in that run. So just before you think, oh, they're not interested in my topic, just ask us, that we will tell you what were the reasons, and we give feedback to the applications that are shortlisted. So Wellcome is not just a biomedical fund, and you've seen the priority areas, for example, that we consider strategic investments in many other areas. Basic does not just mean biomedical, basic just means non-clinical. We do fund population health, global health, epidemiology. We really want a diverse range of science in our portfolio. We do care about the health impact and translation, so it doesn't matter where you are in the research line, from the very basic to the very translation, as long as this has a connection to improve health, we will be interested. Your proposal do not have to be as ambitious in terms of ambitious means you do not have to ask the maximum money that we offer. You have to ask what it is required to deliver, and we ask you to justify it. If you need less, that's absolutely fine, and it doesn't mean that your program is less ambitious. And you do not have to be a very senior professor to be considered for the Investigator Awards that I will describe later, sort of the more grand, that we judge every project and every applicant for the stage at which you are. And we expect certain things depending on where you are in your research career development. And I think that's an important one. You're not competing with people who've had long careers of research funding. An update, was just the one thing that I wanted to make you aware. We are conducting a science review, which means Jean Smith, who was the former director of the science team, is conducting a review of how we fund science and whether we need to change that. So the results of that will not be known until 2020, and the effects of that maybe will be translated 2021. I think it will be a bit later. So the schemes and everything we have will remain, but it's all potentially up on the air. And the idea is that we've supported science in this way that I described, and I'll continue to describe for decades. But science has changed, the landscape has changed, things have changed a lot, and there is an evaluation as to whether we are doing it in the best way possible and in the best way to have the greatest impact. So things might change in the future. So what funding schemes we have? I haven't said it, please interrupt me. If you have any questions, I'm perfectly fine with questions on the way. Probably, if you want to ask something, it's probably someone else wants to know, has the same question. It's all available in our website. You filter through schemes, and you more or less will find the same information in all the different areas, where you probably will be clicking at the biomedical science research if that's what you want to do, and you'll always have that information from all our schemes, a brief summary of what that scheme provides, and then for each one you'll have the eligibility and suitability, what do we offer and how to apply. This is briefly all the schemes, and I will be talking about the yellow ones, which are the clinical PhD programs. But more or less, so we have humanities and social sciences, science in general, clinical, and that's population health. They sort of roughly divided into supervised learning, so that's P up to PhD, guided learning, so it's the early postdoc years, and the independent, when you become an independent researcher and a leader in your field later on. And again, I'll be talking mostly about these ones, but we also have clinical PhD programs. Yeah.
You said that feedback was given, but that's not true for all of the grants, is it? Because
No.
I've recently had an unsuccessful small grant application, and there's no feedback, so it's very frustrating.
Yeah,
No feedback. Is there really no feedback? If I rang up, can somebody give me some feedback, or is it absolutely no feedback?
you can run up and try to probably. So the way we organise it, welcome. So I come from the science department, and well, clinical is within science, and this is within science also.
Mine might be humanities and social sciences, probably.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they might work different. But we have, so you'll probably have a contact within grants, so there's a whole other department that deals with the first applications, with all the queries about submitting an application, all the sort of policy, the rules, and initial feedback in terms of either advice pre-application, feedback after. So you contact them and they might be able to give you more. The reality is we receive loads and loads and loads, and sometimes shortlisting, if they haven't given you anything, I don't know, because I actually don't know how the humanities deal with it. So with the science, we often have, sometimes it's just 1 or 2 sentences about why it didn't fit into the scheme, or it fitted, it's just that it was so competitive that we have to discard a lot of applications. And we can't provide detailed feedback to everybody. Usually, if I can only talk about the clinical ones in that sense, because it's the ones that I have been running until now. If somebody calls me, I will give if I have additional information. So I'm assuming most people would.
Okay.
So you can try.
It's the third time I've applied, and the third time I've been unsuccessful, and every time it says no feedback will be given. Which surprised me a bit that you said that you would give feedback.
Yeah, so the ones where you get explicit feedback, and I'll show you within the process, is after shortlisting. So before shortlisting, I can tell you for a clinical scheme, if you call me, I will give you if there is anything additional. But in some schemes, it depends on the scheme. A small grant, the number of grants we get makes it impossible. And I understand the frustration of that because you do not know what to do next. So I fully understand. You can always try, I think. So again, research careers framework, this is a bit what I said. We conceptualize it in supervised time, so that's training specialist masters programs or PhDs. The consolidation and exploration phase, that's going to be the postdoc time, and then when you become an independent researcher. And throughout this continuum, and we have schemes that apply to the different times, you gain the researcher skills and the leadership development and mentoring. With fellowships, we want to attract, train and retain the best researchers in basic and in clinical research. Schemes are designed for each stage, and we provide the salary and research costs, including the salary of the fellows research team, if that's applicable to the scheme. Not all, and I'll explain you in the clinical schemes, equipment and other expenses. The award size and the duration varies, and that depends mostly on the career stage. So what do we have in the clinical schemes? Now, one thing I'd like to make clear, for whom these clinical schemes are from, and the announcement will be done by the end of the month, and from then, any opening that is for clinical schemes will be for all healthcare professionals. I know up until now it was limited to medics and dentists, vets and clinical psychologists. The only thing I can say, apologies that it has taken so long, but at least we're there, and I'm actually very happy to be able to say that. So we're doing the implementation now. So it's going to be, so you are a researcher, and what I'm talking about here about the PhD or postdocs. Any healthcare professional that wants to remain clinically active. And one thing that is very important that I think is not very clear sometimes, the purpose of having specific clinical schemes is to accommodate the dual careers. So you want to be a researcher and you want to remain clinically active. And either you are still in training in your clinical activity, or you need to remain active and you need clinically active and you need accreditation and you need to follow all these processes. And that's difficult, and we know it is. So we allow this flexibility in the clinical schemes. That has nothing to do with the topic that you research. So clinical schemes are not for clinically oriented research, are for clinical academics. We have basic lab scientists applying for our clinical schemes because they're healthcare professionals who want to remain clinically active, and that's the key criteria. So it's not the science that you do, it's who you are. That's the list we use. We use the NIHR list of all healthcare professionals. Briefly, I'll touch very briefly the clinical, so these are the clinical career, the PhD programs. Our PhD programs are devolved, and I'm not sure that's a phase you are interested here. I don't know if you already have PhDs or not. Yeah? So these are PhD programs that we have devolved to universities, and so the awarding phase was to award a program to university, and it's them who then deliver a structured and mentored training environment. We have cohorts of fellows with there's additional support for training and development opportunities, and there is definitely the possibility to integrate, or with when you're doing your PhD, to integrate your clinical training and clinical duties. These are the current programs. So if you want to do, we do not offer single PhDs anymore, so the applications will be through these different programs. And I think some of them were already taking all healthcare professionals, not all, but they'll definitely will after we make the change. Except the ones who are specific. I don't remember which one now is the one in Kili that is for GPs. That one, it will remain for GPs. So the next, and that's where the change will happen from the next round in August, is the postdoc space. The postdoc space is what we call the Clinical Research Career Development Fellowship. It has 2 stages, the stage 1 of consolidation and stage 2 of setting to early independence. So here you are a healthcare professional, you want to continue research at postdoctoral level and develop your scientific independence, but you want to remain clinically active. If you're still in training, we will accommodate the fellowship for that, and there are different ways that you can do that. We have examples in the FAQs in the website. I'm not sure you're familiar, these are all previous schemes and we still have fellows within these schemes, but that has stopped. That's the CRCPFs is what we have now. So what is this scheme? It's divided into stages. Stage 1 aims to support fellows to develop and consolidate research skills, to explore new areas. You're still acquiring new skills here. You are an early postdoc, you are still learning new things or consolidating what you have learned, putting together all the skills that you bring. You are committed to a clinical academic career and you have a clear plan for integrating research and clinical training if you are still in training. So what we ask is, if you say, I still need to do some training, that's fine, but we need to see how this works together, that is feasible. They do, the panel spends time making sure that that is the case. A good track record for the stage of career that you are. And we will always be looking for the potential to become an international leader in your field. The second, stage 2, that's when you are setting yourself up to become an independent researcher. Here we want to see research maturity, skills and vision to establish yourselves as independent investigators. So the training element is the one that distinguishes more stage 1 and stage 2. In stage 1, you can apply for training at any time, research training. But here we will expect that you're actually putting together things and you're concentrating on how to become an independent researcher. Whereas in stage 1, usually there is a very clear element of training. Stage 2, you have a clear plan to lead and innovate and create a research program. And at this stage, we would expect that you've finished any training, clinical training that you have left, if there wasn't any. And again, the potential to become an international leader in the field. Total that you can spend here is 8 years, and you can combine it a bit as you wish. 4, 4, 3, 5, 5, 3. That's 5 3s, I would say, more unusual, because 3 years usually will not be enough to become independent. But again, it depends very much what you want to do. If you've had research experience and you're changing fields, for example, that might be a good argument. I need several areas of training, I need to spend more time there, and then I'll become quicker independent. I think it's very much, well, the way I think we say this is, think of yourself now where you are, and 8 years down the line. Where do you want to be? And I know it's hard, and I've never done that myself, and I feel bad when I tell people that that's what they should have to do. But I think it's a good exercise. Things will change, life gets in the way, that's fine. But I think the exercise of thinking, where do I want to go, who do I want to be? So at the end of these 8 years, you are an independent researcher, you have your group. What would you be wanting to do? So who that person is and what you look like is what you have to aim. So what do I need to get there? Which areas of expertise I need to gain to be that reference person that when you're an independent researcher, you will be. And map that out. How much training you need, that's going to be your stage 1. Then how do you become this leader in the field? That's your stage 2. And it's good to have this long-term vision, and then whatever happens, as you go through, you progress, you get your skills. If things change, you adapt your plans. That's absolutely fine. But we want to see a bit that vision. If you apply for stage 1, or I always say there's one bit in the form that talks about personal plans, personal career. That's where you give us that vision. The detail of the application will be about what you want to do in stage 1 and the experimental detail of your work of stage 1. But give us an idea of where you want to go, who do you want to be, and how the panel likes to see that connection. And then at the end, that's the senior. The next step would be a senior fellowship. So what we want to make sure is that by that stage you're competitive for a senior fellowship. It's a bit the idea. That's what I've said. So what we offer is a salary, whatever that salary is, if you've finished your clinical training, research expenses, equipment and maintenance, and staff, but that only for stage 2. Stage 1, we consider that you are still in training, you are an early postdoc. It wouldn't be fair the way think of that. It wouldn't be fair to have a postdoc yourselves if you're still training. And we consider applications twice a year, August and February. That's the application process. You submit a full application that is shortlisted, and there's a committee that shortlists. In other schemes is staff at Wellcome that we shortlist, and this one is done by the committee. And those who are shortlisted go to peer review, and then with that we have an interview. And that's your chance then. You get the comments, the peer review comments, and you're invited, and then you will be asked questions. Some will come from the reviews that you've received, and some will be from the panel themselves. In terms of feedback, if there is feedback by the committee at this stage, we will write you and we will give you feedback. And again, I think the clinical schemes are smaller and is much more manageable, and anybody that has called, we've given a bit more. It's difficult to summarize feedback in a few bullet points, and I think the nuance of the discussion can inform very much how you want to resume it or not. So I always advise to contact, that we might be able to give you more. And we have a lot of information in the website.
Bruna, would you be able to give us an indication of the success rate of these fellowships?
It's 20%. Which is not bad, although it's low. Yeah. So I think what's important is to understand the purpose of the scheme, to which this is a bit more generic, because for the one you are applying for. So again, so if it's a stage 1, we will want to see that training component. So these things have to be clear. Prepare a lot in advance. When I say preparation, it is very much needed. And it's very clear. When you get an application that has been rushed, you see it, and you see it right away. So taking time for yourself to think, work with your supervisors, with your mentors. When you get that application, ask for feedback. Building up a network of critical friends, sometimes very critical friends. You want to have all those critiques early on and ask them to not be nice. Sometimes it's difficult to make these things among colleagues. But I think sending your application to your close circle, usually it's like 2 different groups. One is the people who know a lot about what you're doing, and they'll go through the detail, but you also want to send your application to someone who doesn't know anything about it, because the committee will be made of people, scientists that know about your field and scientists that don't. They all express their opinions and they all give a score. So you have to think on the 2 audiences. You need to give sufficient detail that the ones who know about it decide that this is feasible, that what you're saying you want to do is doable, and that it makes sense and is relevant for the field. But then the scientists that are very good scientists, but they're not experts in the field, can see what the purpose is. Yeah.
Yes, now that the scheme is being opened up to obviously other professionals, will the panels reflect that as well? Because it's very different types of research you're going to see amongst professions.
I mean, that's one thing completely, and yes, and we were discussing this before. We do not have a non-clinic. We have non-clinicians, but we don't have non-medics. Right. But we are definitely planning. So, and also one thing that I think Wellcome is very good is we can co-opt, so that the membership of the committee is not fixed. So if we get several applications, but this we're doing it now, so we might get lots of cancer applications and we don't have a cancer person. So it happens already. So we co-opt people in, but we're looking to have a permanent member that is a non-medic. Yeah. But again, that is it's a very broad list of professionals. So it will, I already tell you, it will be impossible to see yourselves fully represented. But that happens also with other specialties. But we definitely are looking to have somebody that can bring that perspective that we understand that is different. Yeah. And clearly co-opt as necessary at every round. What makes a successful application? I always say concentrate on three things, on the what, the how, and the why. Clearly articulate what are you doing, clear aims and hypotheses, and as simple as possible. That works the best. Simplicity doesn't mean that it's not complex what you then are doing. It just means that somebody who doesn't know as much as you do understands what you're doing. And I think that's important. I always say that the lay summary is not just for the public. It's all of us who are reading that summary. And I think that's where if you can say in simple words that you're doing something very important, that's where it comes out very clearly in the lay summary. Clearly tell us how you're doing it. Show that your experimental detail, the project that you propose, is actually answering the question that you've set. Convince the committee that it is feasible. That's a very important part. So we want you to be ambitious, but it's doable. And they'll usually know. And one problem that might come up is that recruitment feasible. Are you really able to recruit all these people? I deal with lots of non-costed extensions, that we call it, afterwards, because the recruitment took much longer. So this keeps coming back. So when I see plans, I think, I know you can't do that. So make it feasible. So if you have preliminary data, if you've already worked, if you've already done that, demonstrate the panel that you can do it, that it is feasible to do it. It is in your best interest to set up a project that you can actually complete. Because by the end of it, and for the next application, that's what will be assessed.
The language of this is focused towards a particular sort of research. If you are somebody whose research is addressed more by qualitative methods, is it still looked at as favourably?
Yeah, definitely. And I accept that it will take time for the panel, and that we need, this is the work we have to do ourselves, to make sure that there is the person who can basically tell the others what you have to look at. So then we'll have a person that understands that methodology, that understands what is good quality for the qualitative study, and then the other scientists will look at whether the so what question. So if I answer that question, what is? We definitely need that expertise there.
Excuse me, would you be happy to share the slides afterwards?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Trying to write them all down. Really.
Right, sorry, no, I should have said that from the beginning. It's all being recorded, I think.
It's on Panopto, so we're hoping that we will be able to disseminate it anyway. So we're hoping to put it on YouTube, I think, aren't we? That's Wednesday. So yeah.
Okay, I'm happy to leave the slide, so that's...
Thank you.
In terms of the why are you doing what you are proposing to do? What gap you're trying to address? So that's what you have to demonstrate. And why is that important? And the so what question. At the end of the project, what have we learned? The buzzwords, and that's what I wanted to change, because I gave that to someone else. I'm coming from Wellcome only here. Somehow it didn't save. Anyway, so delete that bit, please. Transformational, that's the word that we use at Wellcome. We want transformational research. What does it mean? It has to be innovative. MRC uses step change. They want to see a step change in knowledge, a step change in clinical practice. So what to avoid is the incremental. What is incremental research versus transformational? Knowledge is like a puzzle. When you have a question, there's different parts of it that you need to answer. An incremental research would be the one that brings a little piece of the puzzle. But you need lots of little different pieces to actually make a difference to what will happen, for example, to clinical practice. That, even if it's very good science and is perfectly done, because the schemes are so competitive, is less likely to be successful. What we would like is it's a project that actually, at the end of it, has an impact, changes things. Either mechanistic detail, so what you know about the disease has significantly changed, or clinical practice has significantly changed, or aims to do that. And I think one way to look at this is also if you look at past applications and see what they've done. For fellowships, what is key, we have the 3 Ps, person, project, and place. And these are the 3 things we evaluate. Person, where you are in your career, we want to see an upwards trajectory, that we call. So that you've been active in research. Project is all these things. And then place. Are you going to the best place to do that? Why is that where you should be doing the research? We don't ask people to move, but we want you to be in a place that enables you to do what you want to do. And what is specific for a fellowship is that this project, on top of being transformational and exciting science, it has to be useful for your career progression. It's not just a project that then it's me who applies and I get the salary for it, which it is. But that project has to enable your career progression. If you have skills to learn, how are you going to learn them through the project? How will the project enable that? So new skills, you can get them through courses, but you can also get them through collaborations and through the work that you're going to do in the project. It has to sort of get together. It's not just a grant where we pay the salary. We need, it's the way I define it is it's a very selfish thing. It's for you and it has to serve you, and it will deliver good science. But it is to help you develop your career. And that aspect is important. In terms of the clinical fellowships, that's all I wanted to say. The rest is other grant schemes. So if you have any questions, or maybe we can do at the end. So other awards. So the fellowships, we pay the fellow's salary. In these next ones, you have a position. So you are established in a way. You have a tenant position. So we have the Investigator Awards, and this is flexible funding to support researchers at all career stages, working on important questions of relevance to our scientific remit. And again, anything that improves health will be within our remit. You can be an early stage career researcher, so show that you can innovate and drive advances in your field. If you are mid-career or senior researcher, we will ask a bit more of you. Same thing with the sort of the magnitude of the project. So it's up to seven years of funding, from $500,000 to up to $3 million. If you ask for $5 million, for $500,000, we will expect some impact. If you ask that amount, we will expect a proportional impact, right? So it goes together, a big value of money. And applications are considered 3 times a year. Then we have the Biomedical Resource and Technology Development Grants, and this is when you want to maintain resources, establish resources and technology for the benefit of the wider scientific community. In both, all the ones I'm going to say, your salary has to be covered by your research organization. You have a position. And we fund between up to 1.5 million for 5 years. If you want to submit for a cohort, that's a separate scheme that you need to contact us. And this is once a year. There's also team awards, and these are the collaborative awards. This is to fund independent research groups to work together on important scientific problems that can only be solved through collaborative efforts. Now, it's important here, and these ones, I definitely would suggest that you contact the person who runs the schemes to make sure that it's a collaborative award. Not because you work with 2 or 3 people of slightly different fields makes that a collaborative award. You have to think, would not that be a co-applicant in a regular grant? The collaborative awards are people from very different fields that need to get together, each one bringing a separate expertise. And it's only by being together that you can create that new thing. For these ones, we do require most of the time that there is research expertise, so it usually tends to be more senior people. And you have to have your salary secured. It's up to 4 million for up to 5 years, and it covers research expenses, and it's 3 times a year. If you need, for the clinical schemes, I'm moving to a new position, so I won't be doing clinical schemes anymore. That's why my name is not there, but my colleague Maya Warburg will be taking over my role. And Sarah Marshall, who's the head of the clinical and physiological sciences. And then the equivalent team that manages all this grant aspect of submission and the initial queries will go through them is Kiri and Sharon, that you can always email, or the generic grants inquiry email, and then it gets distributed to the most relevant person. And I think that's all I have to say. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy.
Can I just ask,
Please.
you mentioned about the clinical PhD programmes, and given that we've now broadened it to include healthcare professions, what's the sort of cycle in terms of those and opportunities for an institution like this?
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't give you an answer yet, partly because there is the next round of programs was about to come when the science review came, and I think it's under debate whether we do or we do not have another round of PhD programs.
Okay.
So the only thing I can say, look at the news, whether it's a new round of clinical PhD programs opens. A non-clinical did, and that's passed, and they've been already awarded. What will happen to the non-clinicals because of that, not at the same phase, I actually don't know. But the current programs that we have, but they're not here, do have cycles of new PhDs, but they're not here. There is one in Bristol, I think, the G4...
Yeah, it's University of Bristol,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't deliver. When you look at the list there of institutions that have these programmes, they do not represent the institutions that deliver nursing and allied health professions. So Keele there is primary care, Exeter have just started nursing, but of the rest of those, Cardiff will be the only other ones that would...
But that's a very generic university. Some of them are much more specific and some are very open.
Yeah.
And they will have to, but I think some of them were already doing it ahead of us, all healthcare professionals. So it's going through their application process.
Yeah, but like University of Bristol doesn't train nurses or allied health professionals, so new people wouldn't look to those places to do a PhD necessarily.
Yeah. No, I fully understand that is more difficult. Do you have to do PhDs here, just to get a sense, feel where you are in your research careers?
Do we have to do them?
What stage are you in research career? Are you pre-PhD, postdocs? Is a bit of everything?
Yeah,
Pre. Post. Okay.
Yeah.
So for the pre, unfortunately, is looking through those. You can be very creative, I think, and try to find supervisors and try to find somebody that because the program might not be, the current list of supervisors might not be somebody that will have the expertise for what you want to do. But maybe you can suggest others. I would be very active and finding people that want to. And, I wouldn't say no immediately, they don't have the program, because you might be able to do what you want to do with what they can offer if you have an additional supervisor in another place, for example, that will cover the other expertise. Don't discount yourselves right away just because the place hasn't.
Do you think they may be looking at providing a programme for allied health professionals and nursing in terms of PhD? Would they be looking for another institution to potentially cover that gap?
If there is another round, I think that could be one programme that could do that. So this is the university. So these are applications, programs that come to us.
Yeah.
So we very much, we would be very open to, and it would be, one more to evaluate. And I think we would be very happy to look at that. And then it will go through the same criteria than all the other ones, than all the programs. but it has to come from the outside. So
From
you can
university
create
could
the
apply
need.
then.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely an IHR has already lots more of these things in place. And again, this depends very much for us. That what we could do now is let them know that their criteria has to mirror ours. But again, some did it before us, so.
Can I, if nobody else is YouTube,
No,
we'll
no,
go
yeah.
straight, go on.
I mean, you've mentioned the NIHR, and it's really interesting to see that the eligible professions are exactly what the NIHR are using. It does then sort of raise the question about what distinguishes your fellowships perhaps from the NIHR ones. What sorts of things should potential candidates be thinking about when making a decision whether to apply to NIHR or to apply to Wellcome? Is it
Yeah.
around the topic areas, or?
Yeah, so NIHR is more restricted in terms of the topic area than us, for example. So there are certain things that you can apply for them, but you can still apply to us. And there are things that you could apply to us that you cannot apply to them. So in that sense, their criteria will be more restrictive. Anything that improves health, it's within our remit. What I'll say is apply everywhere. So, and there's the MRC, and then there's the different charities. With fellowships, because we know it's so hard and it takes time, we allow applications. We just ask you to tell us, let us know that you've submitted the same thing with different funders. Does not affect at all. We actually think that, oh, so we got it, we're actually happy. Apply everywhere. And once you have the research question, it's just adapting it. Make sure you adapt it. Make sure I don't see that is the same MRC application that is just fitted into our form. Make it fit. But other than that, definitely apply everywhere. They're very, very competitive. It's hard to get a fellowship. It's hard to get a grant. It's hard to do research. I think we are quite conscious of that, and I've done this myself. It's different to be at the other side when but I know what you go through. I've done it, and I've been successful and unsuccessful, both things.
In relation to Shay's question, the NIHR generally like to see an impact in terms of patient benefit within 3 to 5 years. Is that true of the Wellcome Trust, or would they be more interested in sort of more the discovery end of the mechanistic type?
It really
research?
doesn't matter. It's what you tell us you want to do, and then tell us how important it is, and then the committee will decide whether they agree with you. So it doesn't matter. If it's towards the end, yes, they'll expect to see the translation. If it's towards the basic end, then what mechanistic detail? That is not at all part of the decision criteria. Whatever you do, it has to be quality science and transformative. It is completely independent on the topic.
You mentioned about the Investigator Awards, and that there isn't, so that you don't provide funding for the investigator, that the expectation is that the host institution will provide that.
Yep.
Is that?
So it's basically, if you have a salary, you have a position, you apply for Investigator Awards. Now, and that's one thing. If you don't, you apply for fellowships. That fits quite, up until now, sort of the medical career, because they go very similar. I think in your cases it might be different, because you might have positions sort of with secure tenured positions in some places, but you want to move and you want to do research. What we've said from the clinical schemes, the fellowship schemes, is that we will be very open to, if you need to relinquish that, or you come and talk to us, how we're going to work out that you can have that academic position with the clinical, maintaining your clinical skills. And we need to be fair to everybody. We need to maintain the same criteria, but we understand that your sort of contractual positions might be different just because historically you haven't done traditionally as much research. So it's not, the career path are not that set. So we're very open to consider at each stage how can we facilitate that you can do both. So don't discount yourself.
But not with these kind of awards. But not with these kind of the investigator awards.
If you apply for these, you need to have a position.
So
It's almost the other way around. If you have a position, don't discount yourself for a fellowship yet. Come and talk to us. That will want to understand what you want to do and how you want to do it.
Because that's challenging for us, because our salary, we have to buy out our salary by applying for research funding. So if we apply for schemes that won't buy us out,
then you have to do it through a fellowship. Then come and talk to us.
But I think we just would be really appreciate just a flag up to you know to you to take back to your organisation to consider that within the universities at present time that this is going to be a barrier for people applying to do it. I don't think it's just simply because of the nature of our institution and its history. I think it is becoming the reality of universities now that we are, while we're academics, the pressures are such that we have a limited time allocation for our research activity, and therefore the realities of trying to deliver research without funding for our salary is really, really difficult, and it's unlikely to be supported.
So whether we apply for a small grant or investigate however big it is, the subsidy to the university is huge. And they're not necessarily going to support us to make those applications. In
the sense that you don't have a position, or
most of us in the room have permanent positions, but we have to show when we make an application that it will buy us out of some of our time. Otherwise, it costs the university money.
So in that sense, then is when you are eligible for a fellowship.
No, for all of us, at whatever stage we're at. So
for the NHRs, you apply and it's a certain percentage, you ask for a certain percentage of your time, even if you put whatever.
What we do, so sorry, this bit I didn't explain. What we do is we pay your full, your 100% salary, and we allow clinical activities within that salary. So usually
that's only for the fellowships, not for all the other things.
No. But then I think in that case, I mean, again, I recognise that we broaden the eligibility criteria. We have to see how then your situations fit into one or another. What you're describing is it would fit more into a fellowship scheme where it allows part of your we pay for the salary, and that allows for clinical activities within that.
I'm not a clinical person. I'm an academic on a full-time academic contract, so I wouldn't be able to apply.
And how do you do you maintain clinical activity at all?
No.
So in that case, then that wouldn't be a clinical scheme. Would
That's
be
what I mean.
a
If I wanted
regular.
to apply for this one, it would give me a problem because it won't pay my salary. And
But
so for lots
that's
of us
like
in
a
the room.
regular researcher. So
No,
Why
because
is
lots
it
of other
different?
schemes
Why
you
is it
can apply.
different?
Because for lots of other schemes you can apply for.
Part of
But
it,
that-
you know,
charities.
well,
But
the NHRs pay,
some
you put in what you said, one day a week, 20% of your time,
Certainly,
they pay that, you need to do this project.
But I think this is the
But
message that needs
that's
to
would
go
you
back.
describe as a researcher at the university? You have a contract with the university.
No, we're an academic at the university. We're not on a research
Most of
specific
us are not on
contract.
research.
So mainly lecturers.
But I think it's just flagging up. We were just having a conversation here about charities, but it is becoming an increasing pressure for academics who want to do research, be it from a clinical background or not.
I was about to say, I mean, that's not, it's a common problem to have academic positions. There's no time for research, but you have that position. And usually then you apply for grants to do the research, but not to buy out time.
Well, hopefully
But
you
we're-
apply for
what we're
ones that
not-
will buy out time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for some charities that is the case. Some of the larger charities don't pay if your salary, if you have a salary. So versus arthritis, for example, I would say they're not going to pay any of your tenured posts.
Yeah.
Some
So
schemes do.
some will,
Yeah.
some will,
Yeah.
but equally many
Yeah.
won't as well.
Yeah.
So it's probably a relatively equal amount.
But it is becoming an increasing
It is,
barrier
yeah.
for
Yeah.
academics to apply for this type of research funding. So the fact, you talked about this review ongoing, it is, and particularly I think within our areas, where it has traditionally been very teaching and learning focused,
Right.
that it is an even greater barrier when it's not possible to apply for some funding for your own salaried time as part of these awards.
No, I see the problem.
And so it is going to be a barrier which will actually block some very promising researchers that are in an academic position and involved in learning and teaching for going. Fellowships are great, but there's an assumption that there is going to be a clinical component there. And that may not suit everybody, and so those who might be interested in this award and be very promising, that's going to exclude them because they're unlikely to be supported.
Yeah. And I understand then that sort of proportionally happens more often in your professions.
Yes. It's basically because the university has to find somebody to cover the teaching that you're no longer able to do because you're doing the research.
Yeah.
So they have to pay somebody else to come in and cover that part of your work.
Yeah.
So if you're not then covered for that, they can't do that. It then costs the university.
And it's recognising that the funding model for healthcare professions is very different to the funding models for education and medicine, because there is an expectation and there's an allocation for medics to do research, and healthcare professionals don't get that.
So definitely take the message on. In terms of the science review, there'll be a consultation that will open, and I would say, bring in all your suggestions. It's up until now is not even to the detail of how to. We're even at the point of what's the vision. Are we finding all science? Not all. It's broader than that, but definitely bring the views, and that is through universities also, to give you the same opportunities than the others.
Yeah.
But I agree that it's at the end is everybody together. It's one play alone is not sufficient to bring the change.
Yeah.
I think the other aspect that's sort of related to this is around the definition of clinical activity. Because again, many researchers in nursing and allied health professions are based in universities and aren't necessarily treating patients or have sort of clinical activity as part of their contracts. I mean, so some do, some will have dual contracts. But a lot of the clinical research that we do, we actually rely and work very closely with clinical services to get access to patients and conduct the research that way. So again, a looser definition of clinical activity, I think, would really facilitate us to be able to get engaged and be eligible for these types of awards as well. So it's maybe just something else to think about.
We can maintain our registration with the NMC because our practice is considered to be our teaching of nurses. That's our practice.
Yeah. And with this, I can tell you, I can tell you that we'll keep that flexibility because we are very aware of that. And within this, it's us who can decide whether that is an accepted clinical activity. And we are already it's, let's say with the medics, because traditionally they've had it's very clear they do clinic, but they don't all do 100% clinic. They can do lots of things, and this we know, and this I can already tell you that we will take it very flexibly. It already happens with vets, for example, that we have a bit more experience because they've been allowed into the scheme. They have very much this similar, what is called clinical for them, and we are very flexible. So in that one is the one I think we can and we will very much.
So potentially if we're teaching clinical subjects and we are involved with practice partners with regards to placements and things like that, that would be counted as clinical or not? I think that's where I'm sort of struggling.
Come and talk to us. Teaching is, because we need to sort of maintain some parity. Come and talk to us. I think that's the best, and then we will see how we can. I can't tell you teaching immediately. Just I'll bring up that question because that we have to see. We have to see to maintain some sort of parity. But we understand that there has to be that flexibility. The idea at the end is that is what allows you to keep your credentials, then we were going to take it. So we have to see. Just come and talk to us.
Can I?
Yeah,
sorry.
Sure.
I'll explain. I'm the Assistant Head of the Department of Research and Knowledge Exchange for Allied Health Professions.
Okay.
And so some of my questions are very much sort of covering that.
Yeah.
So within our department, we have a number of what I would call new and emerging professions.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier on that you would take into consideration people and where they were and the expectations in relation to the career path or career stage.
Yep.
I'm just wondering again, given that it's broadening out to healthcare professionals, is there any sort of consideration about the maturity of the profession?
Yes, and the only thing I can tell you is we'll take case by case basis. Already the clinical schemes are so varied. With even the people we would consider more traditional, we find all sorts of things, and it's I think we will be flexible. What the thing will not change is the quality of the research. That's the bit where I think that would start bringing unfairness into the system.
Yeah.
So the quality of the research has to be there. Everything else around, case by case, in the sense of we want to enable researchers from all backgrounds to do great research. And that's the key priority, that's the vision that we have. So the bit is deliver that science and your career progression and tell us for that specific person with this background, what is that step, what is that vision? And I think then, and having this delivering the science that goes with the career progression for that person is what we would intend. And I think because there is also the professions who've traditionally been doing research, they have this acquired experience, the craftsmanship, knowing how to write grants, knowing how to pitch them now. That's very important, very important. It certainly helps. So getting that from the other professions I think is important, and bring the expertise from other places.
You mentioned about looking at past successful applications. Yeah. How can we get hold
from
of
the
those?
website? There are examples of fellowships and of IA awards.
Right.
Yeah. Talking to people, successful people, also not successful people. It's more difficult to know who submitted and hasn't, but talking to them.
And that's on the website as well,
yeah.
in terms of their contact
And very
details.
often I did that a lot. I got contacted a lot of people, and you very happily pass advice for the submission, for the interview, for the interviews, do mocks, organize mock panels. That is very helpful. The MRC allows early career researchers, there's a long list for that, to go and observe panels. That's a good learning experience. We don't do it because we have interviews and we think it's not fair for the person being interviewed to have a whole bunch of people there watching. It's enough that you have this.
Yes. Sorry, this is probably a really silly question.
No.
Presumably Wellcome Trust has a whole range of fellowships that are not clinical fellowships as well.
Yes, the whole humanities.
We could all apply for, and will they pay out your salary?
Yes, basically up until now, it's not that you couldn't apply for fellowships. We were telling you to go to the non-clinical ones.
Yeah.
Which then, if you couldn't, if you wanted to maintain your clinical career, is where you had trouble. But it's been always opened, and depending on the subject area, maybe the humanities might be better.
Yeah. So we could still do that.
Yes. What you have to do though is choose. Either you are clinically active or you are not. The one thing, because we have that also, people are sometimes in between. Maintaining, do I leave it, do I not? And we understand that, and people change career paths. Because the other thing, sorry, I didn't say, is that you have 2 goes at each stage. So you can only do it twice. The non-clinical, not even that, once and you are out in this. So it's when you submit your application, submit it when you are at your best and your strongest. What you cannot do is to submit 2 in the clinical one and then I didn't get it and I tried because and then say I don't want to be non-clinical. It's within no, that's what we will not. We've had that. So either you decide that you want to be a clinical academic or you are a non-clinical academic and you choose your paths.
Thank you, Bruna. I think we better draw this conversation to a close, but I think it's been really, really helpful to have you here to discuss and also tell us all the new information that's relevant to our professions here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for all your feedback. It's very, very good. Perfect. And contact us if you have any questions. I think that's the best.